Hey there, welcome back. Now, I want you to look at these 4 games. What do they all have in common? Well, I'm sure there are several things they have in common, but right now I want you to focus on this. They all have a way to select something. For Bucky O'Hare and Mega Man 6, you can select what level you want to start on. For Super Mario 2 and Turtles down here, you can select what player you want to play as. Now, how can we do that in NESmaker? Let's take a look. Okay, here we are in NESmaker. Now, let's start by looking at this test game that I made. If you saw the last video, you have seen this before, but let's just take a look. So, in this game, I can select what player I want to play as. So, here's my test game, Alien Invasion. So, if I press the start button now, I get this player select screen. And if you can see this little guy here, he indicates what player I'm selecting right now. So I have 8 players here. I can select any of them that I want. So let's just select this ice guy. This guy. Alright. So when I start the game, I'm playing as this snowman. And he has, he can throw snowballs, he's pretty slow, and you know, he has his own properties. Alright, so what if I restart the game now? And let's choose different character. Let's go with this spider guy. So I'll just select him, start the game, and now I'm playing as this spider guy. As you can see, he's much faster. He is not shooting snowballs, he's shooting these web things. Okay, let's just do one more. So now let's choose this blob called Bob. Right, so here we have the blob. Now again, he's slower than the spider, and he's shooting these weird red balls, whatever they are. So the point is that I can select what player I want to play as, and once I have selected the player, he doesn't just look different from the other players, but he has his own properties. Maybe he's jumping a little bit higher, walking faster, he has a different kind of weapon, you know, that kind of thing. Right, so how can we do that? Okay, so first of all, this is not one size fits all kind of solution. Every game is going to be a little different, so this is just to give you some kind of idea of how you can do these sort of things. Now, first of all, let's take a look at the player select screen here. So the player select screen, that's just normal background that I made. And if we take a look at collision, it's just a solid frame around the screen like this. And then I just made some background graphics to make it look like, some boxes, and I copied the Sprite graphics to the background graphics, and I pasted them in right here, and I just made some short names for them as well. So this is basically just a normal background. Okay, so why isn't the player showing or any sprites here? Well, I'm using this hide player sprite. Now by default you can hide all sprites. I don't want to do that because this this tiny little guy here that indicates what player I'm selecting, he's a sprite. So I can't hide all sprites because I need to display that little sprite there. But I don't want some sort of player character lingering on down here. I don't want any other sprites other than the little guy that indicates what player I'm selecting. So I have a tutorial on the forum called Hide Player Sprite. It's a really simple tutorial. I'm going to link that below. But other than that, as you can see, it's just a normal background. Also, since this is a scrolling game, I need to make sure that this screen doesn't scroll. So I check left edge and right edge for scroll. So this is a static screen. Okay. So now that we have made this background screen, how do we make this a player select screen? Well, apart from hiding the player sprite, I need to make sure that this screen is set up with its own game state. So if I go over here to the game states, we have main game, start screen, win screen, and so on. Now I made a new one, or I renamed the fourth one. I renamed it to player select. So I just opened up project settings, and here on the project labels I went to game states, and this game state I just called that one player select. That's all I need to do. So once I've done that, I can choose player select here from this list. So whenever this screen loads, that's the game state. So why am I doing that? Well, I'm doing that because I want a certain way to control the indicator, that little guy that shows what character I'm selecting. And when we're talking about that, we're of course talking about input scripts. So I have a few input scripts here. They are really simple. I have one called menu down, one called menu left, menu right, menu up. So I also have one called warp input here. So what do these input scripts do? Well, this is based on a tutorial by Sinestist, a menu tutorial. I'm going to link that as well. So what these do is they change the position of the little indicator sprite. That little guy that shows what sprite or what player I'm currently selecting. Because by default it just draws that little guy here. Let's just start the game to better see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here on the player select screen, this is the little guy I'm talking about. So right now I'm just drawing a sprite at that position. Right now, just drawing a sprite right there. When I push right on the D-pad, when I press right on the D-pad, he moves from this position to this position. If I do it again, he moves over here. Once again, he moves over here. What happens if I do it again? Nothing. I don't want him to move further to the right because this is the last position. So if I do press left, he moves over here, left again, and if I press left now, nothing happens. If I press down, he moves here, and I can just move around like this. So this is what you would expect a menu to work like, right? You can move whatever you want. But what's actually happening here? Well, the code is just drawing the sprite at a certain position. When I press up, down, left, or right, I'm changing what that position is. So I need to have some predefined X and Y coordinates for this sprite. So the X and Y coordinates for this sprite are changing when I'm pressing the different directions. Okay, so before we look further on that, how is that sprite being drawn? Because that's not default NESmaker. Okay, so now we need to go to project settings, script settings, and we need to go down to where it says game here, and we need to go to sprite pre-draw. So I'm gonna edit the sprite pre-draw script. Alright, so here in my sprite pre-draw script, I'm checking. By default, it's drawing the sprite HUD up here, as you can see. That's what's done by default. But below that, I made some custom code here, and I am checking the game state. What game state are we in right now? Because this script is running all the time when the game is loaded. So here I'm checking game state. Is this game state number 3? When I'm on this screen, what game state is that? Well, it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So game state 3 is my player select game state. So if we look at the code, load game state, compare it to 3. Is this game state 3? Well, if it is, then I just branch down here. If it's not game state 3, meaning if this is in the if this is a normal level, the player is walking around, then we don't want to draw this little indicator sprite. We only want to draw him on the player select screen. So if this is not game state 3, then we jump to skip menu, which is down here. So we just skip all this code. But let's say that this is game state 3 now. This is the menu screen, and I need to draw this little indicator sprite. Okay, so what I'm doing here is that I'm using tables. Now, like I said in the last video, I'm going to start assuming that you know assembly coding basics, that you know about variables, tables, stuff like that. So here I'm loading the Y register, LDY, load the Y register. What am I loading the Y register with? Well, I'm loading it with a variable that I called menu X. Now menu X, that's just a variable which contains the X position of the sprite, the little indicator sprite. Then I say, okay, so I load Y with the X position. Then I say load A with menu X pos, comma Y. Now menu X pos, that's a table. So let's go to project settings, script settings. Let's go to my game extra tables, this one right here. Let's look at that. So here is my extra table files. So here we have menu X pass, menu Y pass. These are the predefined coordinates for this little indicator sprite. So I have 4 positions in the X for the X coordinates, and I have 2 positions here for the Y coordinates. And that makes sense, right? Because he's only going to be at 4 different X positions and 2 different Y positions. That matches our setup, that matches the player select screen, right? So right now in my sprite pre-draw file, I'm checking the menu X position, which which is this table. So when I say load y with menu x, that variable, I'm going to get some kind of number. We're going to look at how we set that variable in just a second, but right now let's just accept that I'm loading the y register with whatever's in my menu x variable. Hopefully it's going to be 0, 1, 2, or 3. So then I say load a menu x plus comma y. So y is an offset, so menu x plus 0, 1, 2, 3. Like I said, hopefully the y register is 0, 1, 2, or 3. So let's say that in this case the menu x variable is 1. So I go to menu x plus 0, 1. So if y is 1, then I get 100 here. Now these are pixel positions, so that's what I'm getting here. So load menu x plus comma 1 comma y. If y is 1, I get this 100. Then I store that in the variable temp x. What am I storing? 100, the pixel position. So I'm storing that here in the temp x variable. And then I do the same thing here for the y position. Load the y with the menu y variable and load a with menu y plus comma y, which is this table, but this time I'm loading an offset from the menu y variable, which is hopefully going to be 0 or 1. So let's say it's 1, 0, 1. If it's 1, then I'm going to get this number, 186. Again, this is the pixel position. In this case, it's the y coordinates. So I do the same thing, but this time I'm storing that in temp y. So now, hopefully, I have the correct x position and the correct y position, or the x coordinate and y coordinate, stored in two different variables, temp x and temp y. Then down here, I use the NESmaker macro called DrawSprite. And I use those because DrawSprite, that draws a sprite, and the first two arguments here is in fact the x and y position. So here I'm just, instead of writing a number like 125 or whatever, instead of doing that, I'm using the variable temp x for the x position. I'm using the variable temp y for the y position. So if I got the correct x and y coordinates for those tables, then that's the position where the sprite is going to be drawn. And in the DrawSprite macro, the next argument is what sprite number to draw. And if we just quickly look at that, 112, that's this sprite down here, sprite graphic down here. So this guy is going to be drawn at that x and y position, and this last argument is just what attribute or what palette, sprite palette to use. So basically I'm just using the DrawSprite macro in the normal way, but what's different now is that I'm getting the x and y position to draw this sprite at, getting those positions based on what I looked up from these tables. The menu x plus and the menu y plus tables. So now the next question becomes, how do I set these menu x and menu y variables? Because they are the ones that actually decide the positions here. They are the offsets for these two tables. Okay, so the menu x and menu y variables are of course set in the input scripts. So let's look at menu right, for example. In my menu right input script, I say load A with the variable menu X. Compare it to 3. Why do you think I'm comparing it to 3? Okay, so if it's 3, then it's skip menu right. Then we skip this as code. Why? Well, let's go back to my screen here. Let's look at the positions that I want this sprite to appear at. We have 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, if the position is at position number 3 here, I don't want to increase it further. I want it to stop there. So if we are at this position, I don't want to continue on. Nothing's going to happen. The way I do that is that I'm saying load A with menu X, and I'm comparing that to 3. If it is 3, then we skip this script. Just go down here. But if it's not 3, if it's 0, 1, or 2, for example, then we continue on here. And then I say inc menu X. So increase whatever's in the variable menu X by 1. So if it's 0, it's going to go up to 1. So if it's here, then we're going to go to here. Or if it's here, then we're going to go to here, and so on. So I'm increasing that one. And I'm also increasing a variable I made called player selected. Now this player selected is just a variable that I want in this game to always know later in the game what player I have selected, in case I want to do different things based on what player it is. But just for the menu here, this is the important part. I'm just increasing whatever's in menu X by 1, and then we exit the script. For the menu left, basically the same thing, but now in reverse, kind of. I'm loading menu X. Here I'm saying compare with 0. Now, if you've been working with assembly language for a while, you know that we don't really have to write compare with 0. We can just leave it out. But I just did it in this case to make it clearer. So if menu X is 0, then we skip this script. Meaning, I'm sure you guessed this already, but just to be sure, if we are at this X position, when we press left, we don't want anything to happen. Is X position 0 when we're pressing left? Well, if it is, then we skip this script. We don't want to go further left. Alright, so we what if it's not 0? Let's say it's here, and we press left. Well, it's just very simple. We decrease whatever's in the menu X variable. And again, I'm just decreasing the player selected variable. But let's just focus on the menu stuff right now. Because, sorry, that's what makes this menu system work. And let's just also look at menu up or down. So let's look at menu down. Now, for the menu down, it's tiny bit more complicated, but not really that complicated. So I'm loading A with menu Y. Again, comparing it to 0. If it's 0, then I can do sorry. If it's 0, meaning the menu Y variable is 0, then we can't do menu down. Meaning if, let's go back to the screen, the level select screen, meaning if we're up here, then we can go down. If it's not 0, meaning if it's here, which is going to be position 1, then we don't want to go further down. So we exit the input script. Okay, so let's say that we are at position 0. Then I'm just increasing this variable. In this case, it's menu Y, and increasing that variable. Now for the player selected, since I'm moving down, I'm actually moving 4 positions. So if I'm moving from this guy to this guy, then I'm actually moving 1, 2, 3, 4 positions. So in order for that to make sense, I'm just adding 4 to the variable player selected when I'm moving down, so that I know exactly what player I have selected. But again, for now, let's just focus on the menu itself. Alright, so let's just look at the menu up as well. So the menu up is very similar, but now I'm comparing the menu Y variable to 1. If it's 1, then we can move up. If it's not 1, then we just exit this input script. So again, if it's 1, then we can move up. If it's not 1, if it's 0, then we don't want to move further up. So it's a really simple system. So this is the input scripts, and as you can see, basically all they do is they change increase or decrease the X, the menu X, or the menu Y variables. And while that's happening, those input scripts are run here on the player select game state. And of course, I have to set that up here on the input editor. For the player select game state, I need to run menu up, down, menu left, and right. I need to make sure that those are run on the player select game state. So while I'm here on that screen with that game state, I move left, right, up, and down, and those special input scripts change the variables menu X and menu Y. So while that's happening, sort of in the background, we have this thing running, the Sprite pre-draw script. That's running all the time in the background. And it's only going to run at when the screen is set up with game state 3, the player select game state. So when we're at game state 3, this is running all the time, and it's constantly checking the menu X or the menu Y variables. And based on what those variables are, we are looking up values from the menu X pos table and the menu Y pos table. So these two tables. We're constantly looking up values from those two tables based on the contents of menu X and menu Y, those variables. So we're constantly going to get coordinates from these two tables. So the input scripts change the variables, and the Sprite pre-draw script, which is running in the background, it's actually fetching those values and actually drawing the sprite itself. So once again, let's just take a quick look at this. So here we are at game state 3, the player select game state. So right now the Sprite pre-draw script is constantly running in the background. And what is it doing? Well, it's drawing this little guy here. That's what this DrawSprite macro is doing. It's drawing this little sprite right there. And right now the menu X and the menu Y variables are 0. So if you look at the table, this is the X position, this is the Y position we're getting right now. That's why the sprite is appearing at that position. If I press right on the D-pad now, then the sprite moves over here. And that's because menu right, I'm increasing the variable menu X. That's what happened when I pushed right. And remember, the Sprite pre-draw script is running constantly in the background. Right now, I increased this variable in my input script, menu right. So I increased that by 1 when I pushed right. So this variable went up from 0 to 1. And it's constantly checking this table. So in this table, we went from here to here, 100. So this sprite X position is now 100. So this is happening all the time. The input scripts are changing the positions of the position of this sprite. So the input scripts are changing the menu X and the menu Y variables. But the Sprite pre-draw script, which is running in the background, is actually drawing the sprite at those positions. So that's how we can get this little guy to appear on these different positions. And of course, we need to make sure that we don't move that sprite out of the grid that we have set up, the movement grid. Okay, so now let's look at the what happens when I select a character, a player. Well, as you can see, nothing magical happens. It's just a completely normal warp. I'm just doing like you would do a warp in a warp tile or whatever. I'm just using the warp to screen macro. That's all that happens when I select a player. Nothing special. So if we go to my input editor, and I press on the player select game state and I press the start button, I'm just running the warp input script, just warping. And of course I need to have set up a warp out screen here, which in this case is 0, 0. So we're just gonna warp to this screen. But there's still something missing, right? Yes, there is. There's something missing. So we have mainly been looking at the menu itself, just moving that little sprite around on the menu screen. But of course, in order for this to make sense, to actually play as the blob, if I select him, something more needs to happen. So now we get to, if we go back to the input script, now we get to this variable, the player selected variable. Now that's going to change like you saw. If I move right, I just increase it by 1 on the menu. Here on the menu, if I move right, and I increase the player selected player by 1. If I move it again, I increase it by 1. And as we saw, if I move down on the menu, then I add 4 to the variable. So if I move down here, I add 4, because this, so we have 0, 1, 2. If I move down now, this is player number 6. So I add 4 when I move down. Okay, so based on whatever numbers in this player selected variable, I have I'm sorry. I have another thing going on here. If I go to project settings now, and I go down to game, I have this thing called extra screen load. Here in my extra screen load script, here we have something called spawn correct player object. Now before we look at that, let's just go back to NESmaker for a second. Let's look at my game objects. Here I have my game objects, and I've actually made game objects for all the 8 player characters. So here's player 0, player 1, player 2, and so on. And each of these are of course set up with their own animations, their own let's see, their own speed and so on. But the important part, they all have to be set up with persistent player. Like, you know, it's just a normal player character or player's object. So I've set up 8 player objects here, starting from 0. Here, the normal, this is the normal player's object, right? So I have 8 of those, all set up to be a persistent player. So they all you know, they have the different properties. This one is moving really fast and so on. So based on whatever I selected on the player select menu, here in my extra screen load script, I need to make sure, because this is something that happens when the screen is loaded. So this is something extra they want to add to that. So when the screen is loaded, I start by saying txa pha, so putting the X register on the stack, and I restore it down here. Okay, so I'm loading X with player 1 object. I need to make sure that I have the player 1 object in the X register right now. Then I say load A with the object X, object Y position. I store that in temp A and temp B, and I load object screen, store that in temp C. This is pretty normal stuff if you've been doing input scripts like shooting and stuff like that. So I get the X and Y position and the screen of the player object. Then I destroy the player object. But immediately after that, I create a new object with the exact X and Y position that the previous player object had. So what object am I creating? I'm creating whatever's in my player selected variable. So the player selected variable, as you remember from the input scripts, we set the correct number there. Based on what I selected here, I get the correct player selected number. Now, of course, I need to set these guys up in a way that makes sense according to how I've set them up here in NESmaker. So here's player 0, here's player 1, player 2, player 3, and so on. 4, whatever. So this needs to make sense according to how I set them up over here. So if I, for example, choose this guy, when I pushed right here on the menu screen, I increased the player selected by 1. So we go from 0, 1, 2. So if I select this guy, then that means the player selected variable is now going to be 2. So when the screen is loaded in extra screen load script, when I create a new player object here, I create whatever number is in that variable player selected. And in this case, if I selected this guy, 0, 1, 2, that's object number 2. If we go to my list here, game object list in NESmaker, 0, 1, 2. So this is the object I'm now creating to be the new player. And I'm starting him action step 0, and I'm just going to make sure that he's spawning on the same screen as the previous player object. So after that, I just store whatever's in the X register. Because when I create an object here, that's going to change the normally the player object is usually 0. So yeah, let's not go into that. But we need to make sure we store the new X value in player 1 object. And I'm also storing it in cam object here. And just because I want my players to spawn facing right, I'm loading A with the constant face right, storing that in object direction. So when he spawns, it's going to face right. So that's all that happens here in the extra screen load script. I'm just creating a new object based on whatever's in this player selected variable, which we set during the player select screen. So after that's run, then the game starts up at this screen, and after the extra screen load script has run, we're gonna get the right player object, one of these 8 player objects. Now, since these are 8 different objects, we need to set up inputs for all 8 of these objects. So for the main game, I have, for example, hold right on the D-pad. I want him to move right, so I need to do that for all the 8 player objects. Hold right for player 0, hold right for player 1, hold right for player 2, and so on. So I need to do that every input. I need to do that for every player object over here. So a little bit cumbersome perhaps, but not a big deal really. So that's basically the magic that's going on here. Just setting up this screen with its own game state, using these input scripts here to set first of all the menu X and the menu Y to actually control where the little indicator sprite shows up, but also making sure that we are changing this player selected variable, which is something that I made myself, making sure that that's the correct number based on what we do here. And once we press the start button, have selected something, we just run this little script here in extra screen load, which is going to create the correct player object. And finally, we just need to make sure that we have set up the correct inputs for all the 8 player objects. And that's it. That's how we can make a player select screen in NESmaker. So, I hope you found this video useful, and have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.